The wagon's wheel shattered on a rock 3 miles outside of Concord, California, and Katherine Pierce knew she had exactly two choices: walk forward or die in the desert heat with nothing but vultures for company. The August sun of 1877 beat down mercilessly. As she gathered what little she could carry, a worn carpetbag containing 2 dresses, a hairbrush, and the last photograph of her parents before the fever took them both. The rest would have to stay with the broken wagon, just another piece of wreckage left behind on her journey west. She had been traveling for 6 weeks since leaving Missouri, following rumors of work in the California territories, and she refused to let a broken wheel be the thing that stopped her now. Katherine's boots kicked up dust with each step, her throat dry as sandpaper, her dress clinging to her back with sweat. She had been walking for what felt like hours when the outline of buildings finally appeared on the horizon, shimmering in the heat like a mirage. Concord was smaller than she had imagined, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and scattered houses spreading out into the scrubland beyond. But it was civilization, and right now that was all that mattered. She stumbled into the general store, grateful for the shade, and the proprietor, a round-faced woman with graying hair, took one look at her and poured a cup of water without being asked. "You look half dead, girl," the woman said, not unkindly. "Where did you come from?" "Missouri," Katherine managed between gulps of water. "My wagon broke down a few miles back. I'm looking for work, any kind of work." The woman's expression shifted to something between pity and skepticism. "Work is scarce around here for a woman alone. Most folks can barely feed themselves." "The drought has been hard on everyone." Katherine's heart sank, but she straightened her shoulders. "I can cook, clean, mend, tend animals. I grew up on a farm. I'm not afraid of hard work." The proprietor studied her for a long moment, then glanced toward the window. "There might be one place. Dalton Whitmore's ranch, about 2 miles east of town. His wife died last winter giving birth to their 5th child, and from what I hear, those children are half wild and half starved. He's been trying to manage the ranch and the kids on his own, but it's more than any one man can handle." She paused, her voice dropping. "Word is those children haven't had a proper warm meal in weeks. He's drowning out there, too proud to ask for help." Katherine felt something stir in her chest, not quite hope, but close to it. "Do you think he would hire me?" "I think he needs someone desperately, even if he does not know how to admit it. But I will warn you, girl, Dalton Whitmore is a hard man. Grief has made him harder. Do not expect warmth or kindness. Expect work, and lots of it." "That's all I'm asking for," Katherine said firmly. The woman gave her directions, refilled her water canteen without charge, and sent her on her way with a piece of dried beef. Katherine walked out of town as the afternoon sun began its slow descent, following a dusty road that cut through golden grassland dotted with oak trees. The landscape was different from Missouri, drier, harsher, but beautiful in its own stark way. The Whitmore ranch appeared gradually, first a fence line that needed mending, then a barn with a sagging roof, then a house that had once been painted white but was now mostly bare wood. The yard was cluttered with tools, a broken wagon wheel, scattered hay, and what looked like a child's shirt hanging from a fence post. Chickens wandered freely, pecking at nothing, and somewhere nearby she could hear the lowing of cattle. Katherine approached the porch cautiously, suddenly aware of how she must look dusty, bedraggled, desperate. She raised her hand to knock just as the door flew open and a small boy, no more than 5, came barreling out, chased by a slightly older girl. They both skidded to a halt when they saw her, staring with wide eyes. "Pa," the girl shouted over her shoulder. "There's a lady here." Heavy footsteps sounded from inside the house, and then a man filled the doorway. Dalton Whitmore was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, but they were hard eyes, the eyes of a man who had forgotten what it felt like to rest. His shirt was partially unbuttoned, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and there was a wariness in his stance that suggested he trusted nothing and no one. "Can I help you?" His voice was rough, unwelcoming. Katherine lifted her chin. "I'm looking for work. I heard in town that you might need help with your children and your household." Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or suspicion. "Who told you that?" "The woman at the general store. She did not give her name." "Mrs. Henderson," he muttered. "Always minding everyone else's business." He looked Katherine up and down, his expression unreadable. "I do not have money to pay a housekeeper." "I'll work for room and board," Katherine said quickly. "And whatever you can spare when you can spare it. I have nowhere else to go, Mr. Whitmore. My wagon broke down outside of town, and I've been traveling for weeks looking for any kind of employment. I'm a hard worker. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, help with the animals. Whatever you need." He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if chewing over her words. Behind him, she could hear more children's voices, a baby crying. The sound seemed to decide something for him. "I have 5 children," he said flatly. "Aged 9 down to 7 months. The house is a disaster. I have been trying to keep the ranch running and keep them fed, but I am failing at both. If you are expecting easy work or pleasant conditions, you should walk back to town right now." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Katherine repeated, "and I'm not afraid of children." Another long pause, then he stepped back from the doorway. "Come in, then. We'll try this for a week and see if it works." Katherine picked up her carpetbag and followed him inside. The house was indeed a disaster, dishes piled in the sink, clothes scattered across furniture, the floor gritty with tracked-in dirt. But it was also clear that this had once been a well-kept home. There were curtains on the windows, a handmade quilt draped over the back of a rocking chair, a vase on the mantel that probably once held flowers. 3 more children emerged from various corners of the house as she entered. The oldest, a girl with dark braids and her father's gray-blue eyes, looked to be about 9. A boy of perhaps 7 stood next to her, and a toddler, maybe 2 years old, clung to the older girl's skirt. From another room, the baby continued to cry. "This is Martha, James, Samuel, and Emma," Dalton said, gesturing to the children in order of age. "The baby is Lucy. She is the youngest." His voice caught slightly on the baby's name. "It's nice to meet you all," Katherine said, directing her words to the children. "My name is Katherine Pierce." The children stared at her silently, and Katherine saw the same wariness in their eyes that she had seen in their father's. These were children who had learned not to trust, not to hope for too much. Dalton cleared his throat. "Martha has been trying to help with the cooking and the baby, but she is 9 years old. She should not have to carry that burden." There was guilt in his voice, raw and painful. "I will show you where you can sleep. There's a small room off the kitchen that my wife used for sewing. It has a bed." He led her through the house, the baby's cries growing louder as they passed a bedroom where a wooden cradle rocked slightly. Katherine could not help herself. She set down her carpetbag and stepped into the room. The baby, red-faced and wailing, was wrapped in a blanket that had come loose. "May I?" Katherine asked, looking at Dalton. He nodded stiffly. Katherine lifted the baby gently, rewrapping the blanket and tucking it securely before settling the infant against her shoulder. She swayed slightly, humming under her breath, and after a few moments, the crying diminished to hiccups and then stopped altogether. Lucy's tiny hand curled against Katherine's neck. When she looked up, Dalton was staring at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between relief and pain. "She's been crying for an hour," he said quietly. "I fed her, changed her, but nothing worked." "Sometimes they just need to be held," Katherine said softly. "Just to know someone is there." Dalton looked away, his jaw tight. "The room is through here." The sewing room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the eastern pasture. It was more than Katherine had hoped for. "This will be perfect," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." "Dalton," he corrected gruffly. "If you are going to be living here, you might as well use my name." He paused at the doorway. "We eat at sundown, or we would if there was anything to eat. There is some salt pork in the pantry and some beans. I have been meaning to get to town for supplies, but there is never enough time." "I'll make do with what's here," Katherine assured him. "You go do what you need to do with the ranch. I'll take care of the house and the children." He looked at her for another moment, something unspoken passing across his face, then nodded and left. Katherine stood in the quiet room, still holding the baby, and took a deep breath. She had found work. She had found shelter. Now she just had to prove she could handle what she had taken on. She spent the rest of the afternoon assessing the situation. The pantry was indeed sparse: some beans, salt pork, flour that was running low, a little cornmeal, some dried apples. Not much, but she had worked with less. She soaked the beans and set them to boil with the salt pork and some wild onions she found growing near the house. She mixed up cornbread with the cornmeal and set it to bake in the wood stove. While the food cooked, she tackled the dishes, heating water and scrubbing until her hands were red. The older children watched her warily at first, but gradually they began to drift closer. Martha, the 9-year-old, finally approached. "Are you going to stay?" the girl asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm going to try," Katherine said honestly. "Would you like me to stay?" Martha's expression cracked slightly. "We need help. Pa is trying, but he cannot do everything, and I cannot keep the boys from fighting or make Emma stop crying when she wants Ma." Katherine's heart squeezed. She dried her hands and crouched down to Martha's eye level. "I cannot replace your mother," she said gently. "No one can. But I can help take care of you and your brothers and sisters. I can make sure you have hot meals and clean clothes and someone to talk to when things are hard. Would that be all right?" Martha's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded fiercely. "Yes, madam. You can call me Katherine," she said, and then, on impulse, she pulled the girl into a hug. Martha stiffened for a moment, then melted against her, and Katherine felt the girl's thin shoulders shake with silent sobs. By the time Dalton came in from the ranch that evening, covered in dust and smelling of horses, the house had been transformed. The dishes were clean and stacked, the floor had been swept, the clothes had been gathered for washing. The table was set with mismatched plates, and in the center sat a pot of beans and salt pork, a pan of cornbread, and a bowl of sliced dried apples that Katherine had rehydrated and sprinkled with a little of the precious sugar she had found. Dalton stopped in the doorway, staring. "Supper is ready," Katherine said, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "It's not much, but it's hot." "It smells like heaven, James," the 7-year-old said reverently. Dalton looked at his children gathered around the table, their faces cleaner than they had been in weeks, their eyes bright with anticipation. He looked at Katherine, standing by the stove with Lucy sleeping in a basket at her feet. Something in his expression shifted. The hardness did not disappear, but it softened at the edges. "Let's eat then," he said, his voice rough. They sat down together and Katherine dished out the food. She watched as the children fell on the meal like they were starving, which she realized with a pang they probably were. Dalton ate more slowly, but she noticed he went back for seconds, then thirds. "This is the best thing I have eaten in months," he admitted finally, not quite meeting her eyes. It's just beans and salt pork, Katherine said. It's a warm meal, he corrected. That's more than we've had in weeks. I have been giving them cold biscuits and jerky because I do not have time to cook anything more. I know that is not enough. I know I have been failing them. The pain in his voice was so raw that Katherine had to look away. You have been doing the best you can, she said quietly, but you do not have to do it alone anymore. He did not respond, but when she glanced at him, she saw him swallow hard, his hands clenched on the table. After dinner, Katherine heated water and bathed the children one by one, combing the tangles from their hair and finding them clean nightshirts. She tucked them into beds that she had made up with fresh linens, and she sat with Emma, the 2-year-old, until the little girl's eyes drifted closed. When she finally emerged from the children's rooms, exhausted, she found Dalton sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at nothing. They are all asleep, she said softly. He looked up, and in the lamplight she could see the deep lines of exhaustion etched into his face. I have not gotten them all to sleep before midnight in weeks, he said. How did you do it? They were tired. They just needed some structure and comfort. She hesitated, then poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. How long has it been since you slept through the night? I do not remember, he admitted. Since my wife died. Since before that, actually. She was sick for weeks before the baby came, and I was taking care of her and trying to keep the ranch running. And then she was gone, and there was the baby and the other children, and I just kept going because what else could I do? You could accept help, Katherine said gently. His eyes met hers, and she saw anger flash there, but it was not directed at her. It was anger at himself, at the world, at the unfairness of losing someone he loved. I should not need help. I should be able to take care of my own family. Everyone needs help sometimes, Katherine said. That does not make you weak. It makes you human. He looked at her for a long moment, then scrubbed his hands over his face. I do not even know you. You could be anyone. For all I know, you could rob us blind in the middle of the night. I could, Katherine agreed, but I will not. I need this job, Mr. Whitmore Dalton. I need a place to stay and work to do. Your children need someone to take care of them. It seems like a fair arrangement to me. Why do you need work so badly? He asked. A woman like you are young, educated, well-spoken. You could probably find a husband easy enough. Katherine felt her spine stiffen. I do not want a husband. I want honest work and the ability to take care of myself. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Fair enough. I will not pry into your past if you do not pry into mine. Agreed, Katherine said. They sat in silence for a moment, and Katherine found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. Despite the exhaustion and the grief that clung to him like a shadow, Dalton Whitmore was a handsome man. There was strength in the set of his shoulders, in the calluses on his hands, in the way he looked at his children with fierce, desperate love. He was a man who had been broken by loss but was still fighting to keep his family together. She had not come here looking for anything beyond work and shelter. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for her employer, especially one who was still grieving his wife. But as she sat across from him in the quiet kitchen, listening to the night sounds through the open window, she felt something stir in her chest, a dangerous warmth, a flicker of connection. She pushed it down firmly. She was here to work, nothing more. Over the next few days, Katherine settled into a rhythm. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, usually cornmeal mush or biscuits with whatever she could scavenge from the pantry. She packed Dalton food to take with him when he went out to work the cattle, and she spent her days cleaning, mending, and caring for the children. She made lists of what they needed, from town sugar, flour, coffee, fabric for new clothes, shoes for James whose boots were falling apart. Dalton watched her work with a mixture of gratitude and something that looked like guilt. On the third evening, he came in from the ranch and dropped a small leather pouch on the table beside her. "What's this?" she asked. "Money for supplies. I sold 3 head of cattle in town today. It is not much, but it should be enough to get what we need most." He paused, his jaw working. "And there is a little extra for you. I know I said I could not pay you, but it does not sit right with me, having you work for nothing." Katherine picked up the pouch, feeling the weight of coins inside. "Thank you. I will go to town tomorrow and get supplies." "Take the wagon," he said, "and take Martha with you. She could use a day away from the ranch, and she can help you carry things." The next morning, Katherine and Martha set out for town in the wagon. It was the first time Katherine had really been alone with the oldest girl, and she used the opportunity to talk with her, to learn about her life before her mother died. "Ma used to sing all the time," Martha said wistfully as they drove. "She would sing while she cooked, while she cleaned, while she put us to bed. The house was always full of music." "Do you remember any of the songs?" Katherine asked. Martha nodded and began to sing in a soft, wavering voice. It was an old hymn, one Katherine recognized from her own childhood. She joined in, harmonizing, and Martha's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. They sang together the rest of the way to town, and by the time they arrived, Martha was smiling, really smiling for the first time since Katherine had arrived. Mrs. Henderson at the general store looked surprised and pleased to see Katherine still at the Whitmore ranch. "So it is working out then?" she asked as she measured out flour. "So far," Katherine said cautiously. "Those children needed someone," Mrs. Henderson said. "And Dalton Whitmore needed someone, though he would never admit it. He has been half mad with grief and exhaustion." She lowered her voice. "His wife, Sarah, was a lovely woman. They were very much in love. Her death nearly destroyed him." Katherine felt something twist in her chest at those words, though she could not have said why. "He seems to be managing as well as anyone could." "He is surviving, not living," Mrs. Henderson said. "There is a difference, but maybe now, with your help, things will get better." Katherine and Martha loaded the wagon with supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, salt, dried beans, rice, a small sack of potatoes, fabric for new shirts and dresses, thread, needles, and new boots for James. Katherine also bought peppermint sticks for the children, using a few of her own precious coins. On the way back to the ranch, Martha asked, "Are you going to leave us?" Katherine glanced at the girl, seeing the fear in her eyes. "I am not planning to leave. Why do you ask?" "Everyone leaves," Martha said quietly. "Ma left. Not because she wanted to, but she still left. And Pa, he is still here, but sometimes it feels like he left too. Like he is here but not really here." Katherine's throat tightened. "Your father loves you very much. He is just hurting right now. Grief makes people act differently than they normally would." "Do you think he will ever be happy again?" Martha asked, her voice small. Katherine chose her words carefully. "I think happiness looks different after you lose someone you love. I think your father will always miss your mother, but I also think that, with time, he will learn how to smile again. How to laugh, how to be present with you children. It just takes time." "I hope you are right," Martha whispered. When they returned to the ranch, Dalton helped them unload the wagon. His eyes widened slightly when he saw how many supplies Katherine had managed to buy with the money he had given her. "You are a better negotiator than I am," he said, almost smiling. "Mrs. Henderson usually charges me twice this much." "I think she gave me a better price because she feels sorry for the children," Katherine said honestly. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I will take pity if it means my children eat well." That night, Katherine made a real feast: potatoes fried with onions, beans cooked with salt pork, and biscuits with butter and honey she had bought as a treat. For dessert, She made dried apple pie, and when she set it on the table, the children's eyes went wide. "Is that pie?" Samuel, the 5-year-old, asked in awe. "It is," Katherine confirmed. "We have not had pie since Ma died," James said. There was a moment of awkward silence, then Dalton cleared his throat. "Then we are lucky to have Katherine here to make us pie." The children fell on the meal with enthusiasm, and Katherine felt a warm glow of satisfaction watching them eat. She glanced at Dalton and found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch something softer than she had seen from him before, something almost like tenderness. He looked away quickly when he realized she had noticed, but the moment lingered between them. After the children were in bed that night, Katherine sat on the porch in the cool evening air, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of cattle. She had been at the ranch for a week now, and already it was starting to feel like home in a way nowhere else ever had. The door opened behind her, and Dalton stepped out. He hesitated, then sat down on the porch step beside her, careful to keep a respectable distance between them. "The children are happier than I have seen them in months," he said quietly. "You have done more for them in 1 week than I managed in 6 months. You are keeping them alive," Katherine said. "That counts for something." "Barely." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been angry for so long. Angry at God for taking Sarah. Angry at myself for not being able to save her. Angry at the world for continuing on like nothing had happened when my entire life had fallen apart. I have been so consumed by that anger that I forgot my children needed more than just food and shelter. They needed someone to care for them, to see them." "You are grieving," Katherine said softly. "You are allowed to grieve." "Not at the expense of my children," he said harshly. "You are being too hard on yourself." He shook his head. "I do not think I am being hard enough. I should have found a way to manage better. I should have asked for help sooner. I should have," he broke off, his hands clenched on his knees. Katherine acted on impulse, reaching over to lay her hand on his. His skin was warm and calloused, his fingers much larger than hers. "You are doing the best you can. That is all anyone can ask." He looked down at their hands, and for a moment, Katherine thought he would pull away. Instead, he turned his hand over, his fingers curling around hers, holding on like she was an anchor in a storm. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just being present with each other under the stars. When Katherine finally rose to go inside, Dalton stood as well, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough, "for everything." "You do not need to thank me," Katherine said. "This is my job." "It is more than that," he said, his eyes meeting hers in the darkness. "You know it is." Katherine's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to step back to maintain the distance that needed to be there. "Good night, Dalton." "Good night, Katherine." As the weeks passed, life at the ranch settled into a comfortable routine. Katherine rose early to make breakfast, Dalton went out to work the cattle and mend fences, and the children began to thrive under Katherine's care. Martha smiled more often. James stopped getting into fights with Samuel. Emma's nightmares became less frequent. And baby Lucy, who had been fussy and difficult, became a placid, happy infant who smiled at everyone. The house itself was transformed clean and organized, with curtains Katherine had sewn hanging in the windows and wildflowers she picked decorating the table. She had even started a small vegetable garden near the house, planting seeds for tomatoes, squash, and beans. Dalton noticed every change, every improvement, and Katherine could feel his eyes on her more and more often. There was something building between them, something neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge aloud. One evening in late September, Dalton came in from the ranch looking troubled. He washed up in silence, then sat down at the table while Katherine dished out supper. "There is going to be a social at the church on Saturday," he said abruptly. "A harvest celebration. The children should go. It will be good for them to spend time with other families." "That sounds wonderful," Katherine said. "I'm sure they will love it." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I would like you to come as well, as part of the family." Katherine's hand stilled on the serving spoon. "As part of the family, people will talk if you do not come," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "They will wonder why my housekeeper is not invited to social events. It will raise questions." Katherine felt a flicker of disappointment, though she could not have said what she had been hoping for. "Of course, if you think it is best." Saturday arrived warm and clear, and Katherine dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue calico that she had mended and pressed until it looked almost new. She braided her auburn hair and pinned it up, then helped Martha into the new dress Katherine had made for her. The church was a small wooden building at the edge of town, and by the time the Whitmore family arrived, the yard was already full of people. Katherine felt suddenly self-conscious as heads turned to look at them, as whispers rippled through the crowd. Dalton's jaw was tight as he helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Ignore them," he muttered. "They have nothing better to do than gossip." But the whispers were not all unkind. Several women approached to introduce themselves, to coo over baby Lucy, to compliment Katherine on how well the older children looked. Mrs. Henderson was there, and she pulled Katherine aside with a knowing smile. "You have worked wonders with that family," she said. "Dalton looks like a different man, less haunted." "I am just doing my job," Katherine said, the words feeling hollow even as she spoke them. "Is that all it is?" Mrs. Henderson asked shrewdly. Katherine did not answer, and Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. "Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we do not plan for, dear." The afternoon passed pleasantly. There was food, roasted meats, fresh bread, pies and cakes and music, a fiddler playing lively tunes that had people dancing in the churchyard. The children ran and played with other youngsters, their laughter ringing out across the space. Katherine stood at the edge of the crowd, holding Lucy and watching it all with a smile, when Dalton appeared at her side. "You should dance," he said abruptly. She looked at him in surprise. "I am fine here." "When was the last time you did something for yourself?" he asked. Something just for the joy of it, Katherine could not remember. "I am content watching." "Dance with me," he said, and it was not quite a request. Before she could protest, he took Lucy from her arms and passed the baby to Martha, who was standing nearby. Then he took Katherine's hand and pulled her into the circle of dancers. The fiddle music was fast and lively, and Katherine found herself laughing as Dalton spun her around. He was surprisingly graceful for such a large man, and he moved with confidence, his hand warm and steady on her waist. "I did not know you could dance," she said breathlessly. "Sarah loved to dance," he said, and there was no pain in his voice when he said his wife's name, just a gentle sadness. "She taught me. She said I moved like a cow at first, but eventually I learned." Katherine felt a pang at the mention of his wife, but she pushed it aside. "She taught you well." The music shifted to something slower, and the dancers around them paired off, moving in closer embraces. Dalton hesitated for just a moment, then drew Katherine nearer, his hand splayed across her back. They moved together in silence, and Katherine was intensely aware of every point of contact between them, his hand on her back, her hand in his, the warmth of his body so close to hers. She could smell the scent of him, soap and leather and something uniquely Dalton, and when she dared to look up, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Katherine," he said softly, and there was a question in the way he said her name. But before she could respond, the music ended, and people were applauding, and the moment was broken. They stepped apart, and Katherine felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. Dalton cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable, and then Martha was there with Lucy, and the moment was gone entirely. On the ride home, the children chattered excitedly about the social, but Dalton and Katherine were both quiet, lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived back at the ranch, Dalton helped her down from the wagon again, his hands lingering on her waist. "Thank you for coming today," he said quietly. "It meant a lot to the children, to me." "I enjoyed it," Katherine said honestly. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but instead he just nodded and stepped back, letting her go. That night, Katherine lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the feel of Dalton's arms around her, the way he had looked at her while they danced. She was falling for him, she realized with a mix of exhilaration and dread. She was falling for a man who was still in love with his dead wife, a man who saw her as a housekeeper, nothing more. She needed to get control of her feelings before she did something foolish, like confessing them. But control proved elusive. Over the following weeks, Katherine found herself noticing everything about Dalton: the way he smiled when one of his children said something funny, the gentleness with which he handled the horses, the quiet competence with which he ran his ranch despite all his losses. She noticed the way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking, the way he found excuses to be near her, to brush past her in the kitchen, to sit beside her on the porch in the evenings. The tension between them grew until it was almost unbearable, a living thing that filled the space between them with unspoken words and unfulfilled longing. October arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color to the oak trees. Katherine was in the kitchen one afternoon, kneading bread dough, when Dalton came in from the barn looking dusty and tired. "One of the cows is sick," he said without preamble. "I am going to have to stay up with her tonight to make sure she pulls through. Can you manage the children on your own?" "Of course," Katherine said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" He shook his head. "Just what you are already doing. Keeping the house running, keeping the children safe. That is more than enough." That night, after the children were in bed, Katherine could not sleep. She found herself worrying about Dalton out in the barn alone, worrying about the sick cow, worrying about everything and nothing. Finally, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and made her way out to the barn. The interior was lit by a single lantern hanging from a post. Dalton was sitting in the straw beside a large brown cow, his hand on her flank, murmuring soothing words. He looked up in surprise when Katherine entered. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "I could not sleep," she admitted. "I thought you might want some company." He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a bale of hay beside him. "Pull that over, but be quiet. She is skittish." Katherine dragged the hay bale over and sat down, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The cow's breathing was labored, her eyes rolling with distress. "What is wrong with her?" Katherine asked softly. "Bloat, I think," Dalton said. "She got into some clover she should not have eaten. If I can keep her calm and moving, she should pull through. But if she goes down, I will lose her." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the cow's breathing, to the night sounds filtering in through the barn walls. Dalton's hand never left the cow's flank, his touch gentle and reassuring. "You are good with animals," Katherine observed. "I grew up around them," he said. "My father was a rancher too. He taught me that animals respond to calmness, to confidence. They can sense when you are afraid or uncertain, and it makes them afraid too." "Is that true for people as well?" Katherine asked, thinking of his children. Dalton glanced at her, and in the lamplight, his eyes were softer than she had ever seen them. "Yes, I think it is. The children can sense that I have been lost. That is why they have been lost too." You are not lost anymore, Katherine said quietly. No, he agreed, his eyes still on hers. I am not, because of you. Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Dalton. I know I should not say this, he interrupted, his voice low and urgent. I know you work for me, and that makes this complicated. I know I am still supposed to be grieving my wife, and part of me always will be. But Katherine, these past 2 months with you here, I have felt like I am waking up from a nightmare. Like I can breathe again. Like there is a reason to smile, to hope, to look forward to tomorrow. Dalton, Katherine whispered again, but she did not know what else to say. I am falling in love with you, he said, the words rushing out like a confession. I have been fighting it, telling myself it is too soon, that I should not feel this way, but I cannot help it. You have brought light back into my life, into my children's lives, and I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. I am falling in love with you too, she admitted. I have been trying not to, trying to keep my distance, but it is impossible. You are a good man, Dalton Whitmore, a good father, and I want to be part of your life, not just as your housekeeper, but as something more. He reached for her then, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. Something more, he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. I like the sound of that. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but Katherine did not want to. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it deepened quickly, becoming something urgent and desperate, all the weeks of pent-up longing pouring out in that single connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. I want to court you properly. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours. I would like that, Katherine said, smiling through her tears. The cow made a low sound, shifting in the straw, and Dalton reluctantly pulled back. I should focus on her. But tomorrow we will talk about this more, about us. Katherine nodded and stood to leave, but Dalton caught her hand, pulling her back for one more quick, fierce kiss. Thank you, he said against her lips, for staying, for not giving up on us. I would not dream of it, Katherine whispered. She floated back to the house, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She lay in bed, replaying every word, every touch, every moment, and when she finally fell asleep, she was smiling. The next morning, Dalton came in from the barn looking exhausted but triumphant. The cow made it through the night, he announced. She is going to be fine. The children cheered, but Katherine noticed the way Dalton's eyes sought hers across the room, the way his smile was just for her. After breakfast, he asked Martha to watch the younger children for a while, then took Katherine's hand and led her outside. They walked away from the house, following a path that wound through the oak trees to a spot overlooking the valley below. The view was breathtaking, golden hills rolling into the distance, the morning sun painting everything in shades of amber and gold. This was Sarah's favorite spot, Dalton said quietly. She used to come here when she needed to think, to find peace. Katherine tensed slightly, unsure why he had brought her to a place so associated with his late wife. Dalton seemed to sense her uncertainty. He took both her hands in his and turned to face her. I brought you here because I wanted to be honest with you, Katherine. Sarah was my first love. She gave me 5 beautiful children, and I will always cherish the time we had together. But she is gone, and I have spent the past months learning to accept that. She would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone, drowning in grief. She would want me to be happy. She would want the children to be happy. He paused, his thumbs rubbing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. What I feel for you is not a betrayal of Sarah's memory. It is a testament to the fact that my heart is still capable of love, still capable of hope. You have shown me that. And I think, if Sarah could speak to me now, she would tell me to hold on to you with both hands and never let go." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I do not want to replace her." "You are not replacing her," Dalton said firmly. "You are something new, something different. You are Katherine, and I love you for exactly who you are. Not because you remind me of Sarah, but because you are brave and kind and strong. Because you showed up when my family needed you most and you stayed. Because you make me want to be a better man." "I love you," Katherine said, the words coming easier this time. "I love you and your children, and I want to build a life with you." Dalton pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Marry me," he said into her hair. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Marry me and be a mother to my children, and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." Katherine pulled back just enough to look up at him, her heart soaring. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Katherine felt like she was flying. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and breathless, Dalton took her hand and they walked back to the house together. The children were waiting on the porch, and Martha took one look at their clasped hands and interlocked faces and broke into a huge smile. "Does this mean Katherine is going to stay forever?" she asked hopefully. "It means Katherine is going to become part of our family," Dalton said, "if that is all right with all of you." The children erupted in cheers and rushed forward to hug Katherine, nearly knocking her over with their enthusiasm. Even baby Lucy, held in Martha's arms, was smiling and reaching for Katherine. Katherine laughed, tears streaming down her face, and gathered them all close. This, she thought, was what home felt like. Not a place, but people. A family. The wedding took place in November, a small ceremony at the church in Concord with Mrs. Henderson and a few other townspeople in attendance. Katherine wore a dress she had sewn herself from cream-colored fabric, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Martha and Emma stood beside her as attendants, their faces shining with happiness. Dalton wore his best suit, and when he looked at Katherine as she walked down the aisle, the love in his eyes was so clear that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Dalton kissed Katherine with a tenderness that made her heart swell. The children clustered around them, and they all walked out of the church together as a family. There was a small reception at the ranch, with food Katherine and Mrs. Henderson had prepared together. Neighbors came by to offer congratulations and well wishes, and for the first time in months, the Whitmore ranch was filled with laughter and music and joy. As evening fell and the guests began to leave, Dalton pulled Katherine aside. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a small package into her hands. Katherine unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful locket on a delicate gold chain. Inside were two tiny photographs, one of her on one side, one of Dalton and the children on the other. "So you will always carry us with you," Dalton said softly, "and we will carry you." Katherine could not speak past the lump in her throat. She turned so he could fasten the locket around her neck, and when she turned back, she pulled him down for a kiss that promised everything: love, commitment, a future together. That night, after the children were asleep, Dalton took Katherine's hand and led her to the bedroom they would now share. There was a nervousness between them, a shyness, but also a deep and abiding love that made everything feel right. "I want to make you happy," Dalton said, cupping her face in his hands, "for all the days of our life together." "You already do," Katherine whispered. "Every single day." They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other, claiming each other, becoming truly one. And when Katherine fell asleep in Dalton's arms, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The months that followed were filled with hard work and simple joys. Winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional frost, but the ranch was warm and well-stocked thanks to Katherine's careful management. She continued to care for the children and the household, but now she did it as their stepmother, not just their housekeeper. The children thrived under the love and stability she and Dalton provided together. Martha, in particular, blossomed. She was still a serious child, but she laughed more now, and the weight of responsibility she had carried for so long had been lifted from her shoulders. She helped Katherine with the cooking and the younger children, but now it was because she wanted to, not because she had to. James stopped getting into trouble and became fascinated with ranching, following Dalton everywhere, and asking endless questions about cattle and horses and land management. Samuel came out of his shell and became a chatterbox, filling the house with his constant stream of observations and stories. Emma stopped having nightmares and started sleeping through the night, and baby Lucy grew into a happy, healthy toddler who called Katherine Mama without any confusion or hesitation. Dalton, too, was transformed. The haunted look faded from his eyes, replaced by contentment and peace. He smiled easily now, laughed often, and took time to play with his children instead of just working himself into exhaustion. He was attentive and loving with Katherine, never letting a day go by without telling her he loved her, without showing her in 100 small ways how much she meant to him. In the spring of 1878, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Dalton one evening after the children were in bed, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "There is going to be another Whitmore," she said, watching his face carefully. Dalton's eyes widened and then his face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Truly, truly," she confirmed. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Katherine asked, suddenly anxious. "I know 5 children is already a lot and another mouth to feed. I am overjoyed," Dalton interrupted, pulling back to look at her. "Katherine, you have given me so much already: love, hope, a reason to wake up in the morning with a smile, and now a child of our own. I could not be happier." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Katherine felt her anxieties melt away. They told the children the next morning, and the responses were mixed. Martha was thrilled at the prospect of another baby to help care for. James and Samuel were less interested, more concerned with whether the new baby would take up too much of Katherine's attention. Emma did not quite understand, but seemed excited because everyone else was. And Lucy just babbled happily and banged her spoon on the table. "This baby will not change how much I love all of you," Katherine assured them. "There is enough love in this family for everyone." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Katherine continued to manage the household, though Dalton became increasingly protective as her belly grew, constantly fussing over whether she was doing too much. She found his concern endearing, even when it became a bit overbearing. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him one day when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know," he said, looking sheepish, "but I cannot help worrying." After what happened with Sarah, Katherine's expression softened. She took his hand and placed it on her belly where the baby was kicking energetically. "I am not Sarah," she said gently, "and this pregnancy is different. I am healthy and strong. Everything is going to be fine." Dalton nodded, but she could see the fear lingering in his eyes. She understood. He had lost one wife in childbirth, and the thought of losing another was his greatest nightmare. As her due date approached in early September, Katherine made sure everything was prepared. She had clean linen stacked and ready, baby clothes washed and folded, and she had arranged for Mrs. Henderson to come out to the ranch when her time came to help with the birth and the other children. The baby came on a warm September evening, arriving faster than anyone expected. Dalton barely had time to fetch Mrs. Henderson before Catherine's labor was in full swing. He stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are the strongest woman I know." And Katherine, despite the pain, found strength in his presence, in his love. She bore down when Mrs. Henderson told her to, breathed when instructed, and finally, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, a baby's cry filled the room. "It is a boy," Mrs. Henderson announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy, strong boy." Dalton's face was wet with tears as he looked at his newborn son. Mrs. Henderson cleaned the baby quickly and handed him to Katherine, who cradled him against her chest with shaking hands. "He is perfect," Katherine whispered, studying the tiny face, the shock of dark hair, the tiny fingers curled into fists. "Just like his mother," Dalton said hoarsely, leaning down to kiss Katherine's forehead. They named him David, and he was welcomed into the family with open arms. The older children were fascinated by the new baby, taking turns holding him under Katherine's watchful eye. Martha was especially helpful, becoming Katherine's right hand in caring for David. As David grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Dalton's herd increased, and he was able to hire a ranch hand to help with the work. Katherine's vegetable garden flourished, providing fresh produce for the family. They added onto the house, building an extra bedroom and enlarging the kitchen. On David's first birthday, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Katherine had baked a cake, and they all sang while David sat in his high chair, his face covered in frosting, laughing with pure joy. Later that evening, after the children were all in bed and the house was quiet, Katherine and Dalton sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars come out. "You remember the day you arrived here?" Dalton asked, his arm around her shoulders. "I do," Katherine said. "I was so desperate, so afraid, I had no idea what I was walking into." "I was drowning," Dalton admitted. "I could not see a way forward. I was just trying to survive one day at a time." "And now?" Katherine asked, though she knew the answer. "Now I am living," Dalton said, turning to look at her. "Truly living. You saved me, Katherine. You saved all of us." "We saved each other," Katherine corrected softly. He kissed her then, slow and sweet, a kiss that held 2 years of love and commitment and partnership. "I love you," he said against her lips, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Katherine whispered back. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." They sat together in comfortable silence, and Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here, the broken wagon, the desperate walk into Concord, the moment she had knocked on Dalton's door looking for work. She had been looking for survival, nothing more. She had found so much more than that. She had found a home, a family, a love that was deeper and stronger than anything she had imagined possible. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. David was joined by a sister, Violet, 2 years later, and then another boy, Thomas, 2 years after that. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of children playing and arguments and tears and reconciliation. Martha grew into a beautiful young woman and eventually married a neighboring rancher's son, settling on a ranch just a few miles away. James took over more and more of the ranch work as he got older, eventually becoming Dalton's full partner in running the operation. Samuel surprised everyone by developing a love for reading and an interest in becoming a teacher. Emma became a skilled seamstress and helped Katherine make clothes for the growing family. And Lucy grew into a spirited, independent girl who could ride a horse as well as any of her brothers. Through it all, Katherine and Dalton's love remained the foundation that held everything together. They had their disagreements, their difficult days, their moments of frustration and exhaustion. But they always came back to each other, always chose love, always remembered how lucky they were to have found each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dalton surprised Katherine by taking her back to the spot overlooking the valley where he had proposed. It was autumn again, the hills painted in shades of gold and amber, the air crisp and clear. 10 years, Dalton said, holding both her hands in his. 10 years since you became my wife. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. The best 10 years of my life, Katherine said, smiling up at him. Dalton pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. I never properly gave you an engagement ring, he said. We married so quickly, and I did not have the money at the time. But I have been saving, and I wanted to give you something that shows the world how much you mean to me. Katherine's eyes filled with tears as Dalton slipped the ring onto her finger next to her plain gold wedding band. It is beautiful, she whispered. You are beautiful, Dalton said. Inside and out. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Katherine Whitmore. You gave me back my life, my joy, my purpose. You gave me more children, more love than any man deserves. And I want you to know that I will spend every day of the rest of my life being grateful for the moment you walked up to my door looking for work. And I will spend every day being grateful that you let me stay, Katherine said, pulling him down for a kiss. They held each other as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and purple. Below them, they could see their ranch, the house with smoke curling from the chimney, the barn and corrals, the cattle dotting the hillsides. They could hear the faint sounds of their children playing, their voices carrying on the evening air. This is everything I never knew I wanted, Katherine said softly. What do you mean? Dalton asked. When I was traveling west, I thought I was looking for work, for independence, for a way to survive on my own. I did not think I needed anyone else. I certainly did not think I was looking for love or family. But this, she gestured to the ranch below them, to their life together, this is everything. This is home in a way no place has ever been before. You made it home, Dalton said, for all of us. They stood together as the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. And Katherine thought about the girl she had been, walking into Concord with nothing but a broken wagon and desperate hope. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had gained. She had come looking for work. She had stayed for love. And in the process, she had found everything she never knew she needed: a family, a home, a purpose, and a love that would last a lifetime. As they walked back down to the house hand in hand, Katherine could hear the children laughing, could smell something cooking on the stove, could see the warm glow of lamplight in the windows. This was her life now. This was her happily ever after. And she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. The end.